we have everyone here. So I thought I'd just kick off, give a bit of an introduction to what we're going to be doing today. So first of all, for those who haven't been part of one of our Harness Projects webinars before, these are really a chance to learn different aspects of the UX UI design world. And in this particular webinar, we're going to be looking at how to go through a UX design job interview. So welcome everyone. I'm Chris Ventura, the CEO of Harness Projects. Harness Projects is an education provider. We teach UX UI design, but we do it in a really unique way. We follow what we call a real project learning model. So effectively, our students work on live company challenges while we train them. So we really pride ourselves on being one of the only providers that help students gain skills and experience all in the one course. So we're going to be lifting the hood on what hiring managers look for during a UX design job interview in today's webinar, or tonight if you're in the US. So in previous webinars, we have usually invited our Australian graduates to participate, but we want to do something different tonight and invite our US-based graduates. So thanks everyone for being a part of this. Now, the way we're going to structure this, obviously, given this is a mock interview, it's really about trying to highlight the different segments of what typically comes up in a UX job interview. So there will be three segments that we cover. Each will run for about 15 minutes. And at the end of each segment, the panel is going to give feedback to the participating graduate and allow us to all learn from that experience. So we're going to start with a portfolio demonstration in segment 1. In segment 2, we're going to go through general UX approach and core skills, which are important sort of aspects to demonstrate in an interview. And then we'll finish off with behavioral questions. Okay. Now, just to introduce everyone on the panel, I'd like to start by welcoming our UX hiring managers and Harness Projects mentors. So thank you for joining Wilbert Gutierrez, who's the head of UX and design at US Bank. Welcome, Wilbert.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Wilbert. And also would like to welcome Hugh Quach, who's a senior UX designer at Atlassian.
Hi, everyone. Good to see some of you again, and hello to everyone else.
Thanks, Hugh. And also Rena Jensen, UX manager at Google.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Rena. Look, between this incredible all-star panel, they've probably interviewed hundreds of UX candidates over their careers. So I think their feedback is going to be really valuable for us to listen to and hear from. I also want to welcome our Harness Projects graduates who are going to be participating in each of these segments. So I'd like to welcome Alana, Chloe, and Laura. Thanks for joining and being a part of this.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. And I think it just goes without saying that we should all be congratulating Alana, Chloe, and Laura for stepping up and wanting to do this in front of a live audience. It can be a daunting task, but these students have done incredibly well on our Career Launcher program, and it's an opportunity for them to practice as well as for all of us to learn. So I'd like to just make sure that we understand that it is a nerve-wracking type of environment, but this is a safe space for us all to learn. So with that said, I think we'll get started into just some housekeeping things, and then we'll kick off the first segment. You may see at the bottom of your screen for the attendees that there's a Q&A button. You can use that to ask questions to the panel. We're going to try and get to the Q&A section at the end of this demonstration, so towards the last half hour of the webinar. We may not get through all the Q&A questions, but we'll do our best to get through the majority, and if there's sort of some major themes that are coming up. Also, there will be a recording. So this session is going to be recorded. We will send it out perhaps a few days after the event finishes. It just takes us a bit of time to put it together, and then we'll allow you to sort of watch it in your own time if you do have to run, or if you want to review some of the feedback given by the mentors and the hiring managers. Cool. So for the first segment, we're going to kick off with Wilbert Gutierrez playing the role of hiring manager, and we will have Alana, who will be participating as one of the candidates for this segment of the interview. So this is going to be around portfolio. And I'm just going to share in the chat while this kicks off a link to Alana's portfolio, which is what the questions in this segment are focused around. So with that said, over to you, Wilbert. Take it away.
Thank you. And pleasure to meet everyone. And thank you all for joining today to have us go through this interview process or mock interview process. So Alana, pleasure to meet you. Right now I have 3 questions for you, but I guess over the next 4 or 5 minutes, just let's go over what the project is and what your challenges were during this project and how you went about solving it.
Awesome. So a recent project that I worked with Harness on was Veggie Saver, and it's a company that's Australia based, and they were looking to come into the American market in a bigger way. They're already present there, but they're looking to expand a bit. So they came to us to figure out what American consumers are looking for, and also just how to present the product to them. And some of you asked about problems that we faced. They had us attack 2 different avenues of their website. So right now their website is looking at wholesalers and consumers in the same space. So they really wanted us to take a look at that and see if that's the right fit for American consumers. And once we had met with the Veggie Saver stakeholders, one including the founder and 2 other teammates, we were able to put together some of the research objectives. And it was a little bit overwhelming for the team just because of our time frame, but also just attacking those 2 spaces. So something I did to overcome that problem was make a list of all the research objectives that we came up with, and then met with 4 people from my team. So do you want me to walk through the process of going through
so
this?
tell us a little bit about this, about the understanding really the problem.
So when we met with our client, this meeting was designed to really understand what their value proposition was for the product. And they had quite a few different ones. One being that they contribute to Destiny Rescue, which is an organization that helps free children that are human trafficked. But also they focus on reducing plastic and just learning about some of the assumptions that they have about their current American customer and what they don't know. And then just to work together to come up with some goals for the project. So after we got together with them, a group of researchers from Harness got together, including myself and 4 other researchers, and we put together different themes that came out of this meeting just to gauge a little bit better our focus. And then, like I talked about earlier, we went through and I drafted some research objectives just to gauge a little bit better our direction. And we're able to split this up between the 12 of us and move forward. I decided to focus on the consumer space. So these were my research objectives that I focused on here, just to get some clarity on the website needs as far as what Americans want and what they're looking to do once they come to the site. But also, if they were to go on the website, where would they go to buy a Veggie Saver bag? And so these were some of the things that I looked at. Also, just having both that retailer space and customer space in the same area. Will that impact their user flow? And they also were really determined to know if they should add a buy now button on the site or if they should go in the direction of building an e-commerce site. They also wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. They also really were concerned with the current economy and were wondering if we could gain insights about how this is affecting American consumer habits. But also something that kept coming up in the meeting was, what did they trust and what do they value? So figuring out which of the selling points that they have are actually appealing to the American customer and why are they? Also just looking at some of the language, since it's an American space and the website was currently made for an Australian space.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I guess so if you don't mind, let me interject and let me ask some questions here, because I think that this space is going to be very interesting and very important for us all to understand, because some of us may be based in the United States, but that doesn't mean that all the clients that we're going to have are US based. In your example, it's immediately becoming international, right? So you have to understand cultural differences between the different countries and the different cultures that every country has. So tell us a little bit about like some of the main challenges that you faced during the project, and then let us know how you went about solving some of these challenges.
Sure, absolutely. That can actually go down to the bottom here. Just about some of the things that I learned. So one of the things we were speaking about, just having different cultures to look at. One of the things that kept coming up was that users were not sure how Destiny Rescue, which is the sole purpose that Veggie Saver had created their company, impacts them, and why Veggie Saver buying a bag is related to that. So that was something that was a little bit difficult for me as far as presenting that to the client, and just because it was their heart and soul of their company. And something that I found to be really useful before thinking of how I'll present it is asking myself these 3 questions. Is it kind? Is it useful? And is it necessary? And just another thing too that was a little bit difficult was that some of the participants in my research study, they thought that the become a retailer language meant that this was a way for them to sell. And some people even thought that it was a multi-level marketing company because of this. So this was a little bit concerning, and something that I wanted to present with kindness. I was able to do that after speaking with my mentor and going through some things. But the other thing too was looking at cultural differences and just researching them before you present to the client. So the issue with the multi-level marketing company, I had the honor to work with Natalie Troxel, who has such an abundance of UX experience working in different countries. And she really prompted me to take a look at the language that I was presenting to the stakeholder in our final meeting. And I did do some research on multi-level marketing companies in Australia, and just to double check that that was something that operated there, and if it's viewed in a different light by them. And regardless of this, I also just explained it in layman's terms to make sure that it was clear.
So this is great. It's really, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, do you want me to expand on anything, or do you have any feedback on that?
Well, I guess tell us a little bit about your solution.
Sure. So I'll go back up here. So the types of research methods that I use really help to come about getting a better solution. And so I did semi-structured interviews for one of my research methods. And this really helped to get a good insight as to how people were reacting in real life, just because you can add in silence and you'll hear things that you wouldn't hear in an unmoderated setting. So this allowed me to get a deeper insight into things. But then also usability tests were really important to coming up with solutions, just because one of the things they wanted us to figure out was how they should go about adding a purchase feature for buying the Veggie Saver bag online through their website. So to see these consumers clicking through in real time really helped with that. And I sourced 8 American women between the ages of 30 and 64, which was close to their current age range for Australian women in their Australian target group. And the qualifiers really were just that they shopped online and they regularly purchased produce. And after all these interviews, there was a lot of information. So I ended up coding these into themes in Google Sheets, and also produced some personas and a customer journey map for the stakeholder, just so they have as a reference. But this was part of the research report. The insights were really what I went through with the stakeholder in our final presentation. And the solution was really to give them just a better backing on how they can go about bringing their product into the American space in a bigger way. So some of the things that came out of this were from the usability tests. That was super helpful because it showed how much time people were spending on things. So the find a retailer button was where they were supposed to go to find a store that's physical near them. And it took about 27 seconds on average for people to find that. There was actually a find a retailer button in the center of the page that they scrolled past and didn't even see that. So after asking them a bit more about this, they mentioned that they were expecting to see something quite different. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in the opportunity section. But this was also something that I brought up a little bit earlier. Just the word retailer was not a familiar term with American women. So they scrolled past this on the page for find a retailer. They said they were expecting to see buy now and shop here instead. But also the become a retailer button, which was meant for wholesalers. They thought that was a way for them to sell. So that's just a quote from somebody during the interviews. They felt it was untrustworthy, especially since they could not see any product listings. A lot of people were interested in seeing some product listings in there too. And also just one big thing that kept coming up in interviews was they really wanted to know how buying it related to their life. So how does it relate to them? How many will they need? What price is it? How many sizes do they have? They didn't understand that connection to Destiny Rescue. How does Veggie Saver relate to that if they are buying a bag? And then also, one of the biggest things I realized was that they didn't realize it can save them money. And I asked them what their current goals are with their shopping habits, and that was one of the main things. And it was also a main thing for Veggie Saver as a company that they wanted to help people with saving money. So when asking them what their main reason would be to buy Veggie Saver, that didn't come up at all. So that was an insight that maybe they don't realize that. So also another thing too is that they had mentioned they'll buy through Amazon if they really had to, but for a company like this, they wanted to feel like they were directly supporting Veggie Saver. So these were the solutions here. Like I said, the different research methods really helped to come about these. Just creating a more intuitive user flow to purchase Veggie Saver through the website. Even just including some way for them to buy would be a good thing. Right now, they can only find a physical store. And also just adding a button that says buy now or purchase here would be helpful. And as far as the physical location, they could change this and make it a little bit more intuitive by changing language to find a store. One other solution I suggested was, since they really wanted a more personal experience and they were unsure about the connection of Destiny Rescue, they were unsure about the fact that this would save them money by buying it, just adding some infographics to the main page that showed how much money they would save, how much waste is reduced, and also just how Destiny Rescue is helped with their individual purchase. And the last solution I came up with was building trust with American consumers on the Veggie Saver website. So just changing some of that language and potentially make it a more consumer targeted website, since this is what they are expecting to see.
Mm-hmm.
So you have
Yeah.
feedback on that?
Well, I guess it was really interesting to see that you said, or you focused on these three things: kind, useful, and necessary. That was something that was really important in making the decisions. The other thing is really about language, that you discovered that language is so important, and also how something that we may all see as, oh, it's obvious, let's put a button in the center of the page and people will click on it, and that's not the case. You said that they just went right over it. It's so interesting to have those learnings, and that really speaks to the necessity of research, and how the assumptions that you may have at the beginning of a project may prove themselves either right or wrong towards the end of the project based on the research that you conduct. So it's very interesting to see. But I think the more revealing thing here is how you present things to an American market versus an international market, and what you actually what you use to speak directly to the customer. That's probably the core thing here. How do you speak directly to a customer? But I guess just to close off, it's a really great way to see how you've used research to give a company some recommendations on how to really go into a market. And what you were doing is that you're following a set of processes that are utilized in the research space within UX. And once you complete a project like this one, and as you go on, when you complete other projects, you're going to say to yourself, I wish I would have done this differently, or I wish I would have done that differently. Can you tell us a little bit about, if you have to make this better, how would you do so?
Okay, so I think to make this better, I probably would have done some more research on some of their competitors and just how their websites were working. But I think it really would have brought this home if I had made some sort of discoveries on how wholesalers are expecting to see the website, so that could also answer the question as far as if they should make their current website a customer-based website. That's something that I was seeing pretty commonly in their competitor space, but to have some sort of research verification that also rings true for wholesalers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm just going to jump in here quickly, guys, just from a time point of view. Just want to say, Alana, thank you so much for taking us through that. I feel like having your portfolio there on the screen and just seeing, the different things you highlighted throughout your portfolio really emphasized your points. So I think that was really good. I'm just going to stop your screen share now. I want to open up the feedback to Wilbert, Hugh, and Rena as well, and see if there's any other comments that you want to share with Alana about her answers to those questions.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Alana. It's really good to see your work, and congratulations. This is great work. I'll leave it up to Rena and Hugh to give some comments here, just so that I'm not the only one giving some commentary.
Yeah, I can start off. I thought it was really good, Alana, and I think the main thing that I want to notice, kind of how you were bringing it back to work that you'd done and using that to exemplify the different things that was asked about. Really nice storytelling in that way, and a really great way to make it real for hiring managers when you're speaking to them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just two quick things from me. So thanks, Alana, for walking us through it. The first one actually addressed up one of the questions in the Q&A, which is, I think in a typical live interview, you would actually create a presentation so that you can tell the story more effectively instead of scrolling through and just reading out loud, the key things on the page. So again, this is like, learning for the futures. So that's one. And then the second one is that I know this project focuses a little bit more on the UX research part of things, which is perfect. Just to make sure that you set up that expectation at the beginning. In my interview experience, sometimes hiring manager coming in and they was expecting a full, UX execution project right from end to end, and they was hoping to see solutions and design, and then they never, like the designer never got there. And so just want to make sure that when you start telling a story, making sure that they understand this is a research project with some opportunities, of course, but it's not a full-on end-to-end project.
Absolutely. Thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, and actually that may be a bit of my fault, because I jumped directly into the work and into the let's get directly into the work instead of doing the typical introductions that you would do in a real life interview, where you do a little bit of personality and you get to know for the first 5 minutes or so, get to know the person. And so we're interviewing, and this is the position that we have open in our company, and so that may fill a lot of those a lot of that need, or a lot of that those questions or gaps.
Great, thanks everyone. I also want to take responsibility for telling Alana portfolio is fine, don't worry about putting a slide deck together, so that was on me. But I think that was still really great, and I want to thank Wilbert for taking us through that. Obviously, when we're doing these mock interviews, we're trying to really narrow down into certain important areas, but we're not doing the whole rapport building aspects of the interview process, just from a consideration of time. So for those watching, there will absolutely be time at the beginning of an interview where you're going to get to know the person. There might be some more general, personality type questions and just social, connection questions before we jump into the actual work. But we're moving straight into things just for the purpose of the webinar. Okay, so we have a few Q&A questions that have come through. We might just field one or two of them before we move on to the next section and leave the rest for the end. So I'm just going to go through the list here. Let's see. So Erin asks, what is the interviewer looking for when they are asked to quickly go over your portfolio case study? Are there key points that I should cover? I feel like I'm doing a portfolio presentation, but I feel like it gets too long. It's a good question. Who would like to respond to that?
I can take a stab. I think that does sound like a bit of a, hopefully not something you're getting too much. I don't think I would ever ask an interviewee to like quickly go through their portfolio, because obviously that's like a hard thing to solve for. And so I think I would recommend, if that's something you're getting, to try to set expectations a little bit. What are you looking for in this interview, and then assess who you're talking to. If you're talking to a hiring manager, you definitely don't want to quickly go through any projects. Like, that will probably harm you more than it'll hurt you to try and skip something through super quickly. But if you're talking to a recruiter, they might just be looking to like see, do you have the base things that we're looking for? And so if it's the recruiter first stop that you're talking to, maybe it's okay to spend 5 minutes to just show them some designs and say, like, this is kind of my fidelity level and what I'm doing. But if you're at the hiring manager stage and you're speaking to people that are actually working out, definitely try to kind of ask, is there anything specifically you're looking for? Ideally, a portfolio review should be, the shortest I've ever seen do well is like 15 minutes, and they go all the way up to an hour. And so that's the kind of time frame you would need to realistically present the case.
Great, thank you, Rena. Did you want to say something here?
Oh, just real quick to what Rena was just saying. I think, this is a mock interview, so everything can squeeze in until 45-minute slot. But typically, you have a dedicated hour for portfolio presentations, and the recruiter should already let you know ahead of time. So it's not like on the day off, you are asked and surprised to present something that you haven't prepared, right? And so just keep it in mind. You have a few days or weeks before to prepare getting into that 1 hour conversation.
Right. Just one last question, because there's a couple that are touching on the same point here, just around whether should people be concerned about having real world experience in their portfolio versus synthetic projects. So I believe Lonel here is sort of speaking about some work they did in a UX design bootcamp through Google. So yeah, can we speak to that? What are your thoughts as hiring managers? What would you want to see?
I could take that one. And I actually got this question with my class, and the answer that I said was that it's not. So the important thing here is that the hiring manager really wants to see your thinking, your process, how you go about solving problems. If the problem is a professional solution, let us know. If it's a student project, let us know. Don't leave it up to the hiring manager to decipher whether it's student work or professional work. But the more important thing is how you tell your story of going about your solutions, your process, and your thinking, overall your thinking process. So personally, that's much more important than, are you going to have a certain number of pieces that are professional?
One thing I'd probably mention on this, and it just comes back to Alana's presentation, when we think about that brief that Alana had to tackle as a research challenge, it's quite nuanced in the sense of what were the findings that she would be coming up with to address the problem statement that was shared. And some of the nuances were things that, as an Australian, seeing the insights that she came up with were quite surprising, that particularly find a retailer. For me, that's so common. I would just be expecting that button I know exactly where that's going to take me, but it's very different in the US market. And I think sometimes in synthetic projects, it's easy to miss those types of nuanced insights that can come through real world project experience or having to deal with real users when you're doing interviews. So even if you are having to find your own synthetic projects, try and find real customers to do your interviews with, to do research with. I think that's important, because if it's just your own biases coming through in the project, then it's not going to be reflective of your critical thinking skills as a UXer. So that would just be my point on real world versus non. Okay, shall we move on? Let's jump to Chloe's section of the interview process. So Hugh's going to take us away for this section around UX approach and core skills. So Chloe, if your internet's good, perhaps we'll turn on videos for this one. And Hugh, do you want to take it away?
Sure, yeah. Hi, Chloe. Thanks again for participating. So I'll set up some context for this part of the interview. Every company does it a bit differently, but I think generally speaking, we follow, the same kind of process. So at Atlassian, usually there's a few rounds of interviewing sessions for designers. So after you talk to a recruiter, you then have an early conversation with the hiring manager just to see if you're a good fit. And then we would do a portfolio review, which, Alana just walked through with Willie. And so that's where you really show your strongest projects and walk through, the learnings and, and all of that. And then the next conversation is core skills. So this is where you just have a face-to-face conversation with the hiring managers or someone in that company who willing to speak to you on, especially, mostly just designers. So that's what we'll be doing now. And it's an opportunity for the hiring manager to understand a bit more about your design skills, especially if you are more on the less experienced side. We do this too for more experienced candidates, but I think the question will depend on your level of experience. So so for this part, I'm gonna ask you 3 questions, and just feel free to have a conversation with me. Yeah, and then at the end of each question, I'll provide the feedback for you. Does this sound good? Okay, perfect. So the first one is, so can you walk me through your UX process in a typical project?
Okay, so of course, first you're gonna read your brief and talk with your stakeholders. I find after the stakeholder meetings that affinity mapping has been very helpful for me to find key themes that the stakeholders are looking for, so we can really narrow down our approach for the UX design. From there, you know, sketching and just like kind of putting all the ideas out on paper, all the crazy ones, all the good ones. And then from there, meeting with peers and meeting with your stakeholders again, or a mentor, to just trying to get your thoughts out there. I feel like the more you talk about them, the easier it is to flesh out your designs. So I guess at that point too, once you start really just getting like the base of your designs down, that's when user interviews are super helpful, and just really find out like what the users are looking for, what their pain points are, what they wish was available that isn't in the current app or website or product.
So for this type of question, I would recommend that you start out with the high level processes, right? So you zoom out a little bit. So in the UX fundamental course, right, there's like different phases of you know, UX project that you go through, like research. Within research, there's like, you know, different part of it, and then you go broad, right, with ideations, and then can you hone into the best ideas, and you start building prototypes, and then you know, basically you hand off, and you in the real world projects, you will hand off to developers and actually work with them to ship it. So that's like a, you know, a typical project. So keep that in mind, like the key milestone in that. And then when you answer this question, I think speak also from your experience. So try not to like give a textbook's answer to it, right? Like in a way, use your own experience. So let's just say you work on a few projects, and you know, what are the key things that usually as a designer you found super useful for you to do? At the beginning, actually, you touch on it, like you said, stakeholder interview with affinity mapping. That's great. That you pull that from your own experience. So, you know, that's not textbook. So I like that. So try to replicate that through the other parts of the journey as well. I mean, to the whole process as well. So that as hiring managers, I get to know you a bit better. And I can imagine that, okay, if I put you into my team, this is how you're going to help the team grow. All right, that's how you're going to help move the project forward. That's what hiring managers are trying to do in these interview sessions. They're trying to imagine if you'll be a good fit. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, okay, so that's great. So let's move on to the second questions. So in your project experience so far, how do you balance user needs versus business needs? User needs versus business needs.
So I think it's important when you're first talking with the stakeholders. Obviously, they usually know what their big pain points are, and they know what their budget is, and they know what like they're capable of doing. So I think when you talk to multiple interviews, or if you run multiple surveys, you know, you're able to kind of get where the user's at.
Again, I think, you know, I would use the same tips from my last question, which is kind of refer back to your projects, right? Even though this is not a portfolio interview, go back to what you worked on recently, right? And remember, like, okay, was there a point where, you know, I need to do user interviews, but then I also had to do stakeholder interviews, right? They were trying to meet some numbers, they were trying to convert something. And then over here, you know, users are not having a good experience, right? And so go back to those experiences and see how, as a designer, you managed to do both. Or if you didn't do it, why? What was the challenge that you faced, and how will you do it differently, right? And so that's my guidance to this type of questions. And usually after your before interview, like the hiring managers might have a good idea of how you go about this. If they see something missing, let's just say that they feel that you are focused too much on the business needs, and they, you know, you don't do enough user research, they might ask this question. And so that's where you need to come in and, you know, provide that answers. So, okay, let's do the last questions. What's your method of measuring success of your design?
I guess user testing has to be the best way to really discover if your designs are making sense to other people. Because I think sometimes you can, you know, flesh something out and it makes so much sense to you, and then you get to that point and you realize that you're going to have to make some changes. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So what's your method of measuring success of your design?
Okay.
And that's a good start. What you just said.
Okay. I guess from there, just being able to, talk with other designers and then kind of gather some more input. So you're able to really get to a point where you're giving something that you're proud of, that tests well, that, goes along with the goals that you had determined from speaking with the stakeholders. And I guess being in a position where you can still take advice and still get to where you need to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so, and maybe, I can phrase my question a bit more specifically, but I think usually when this question comes up, it's usually the managers want to understand the design solutions that you came up with for each project. How do you know that it's improving the experience, right? Before the redesign versus after. And so if you work on actual projects and ship things, and actually let's just say conversion rate went up by 2%, 5%. So that is one tangible way to measure the success. But if you just recently got into the field and you haven't gotten like an actual project with real result, my recommendation is to think of a way to measure. So how would you measure? Let's just say if you actually have a team and you're going to ship this, how would you measure? What are the key metrics of that project that you can use to measure success? So those are the thing that the hiring managers would like to understand a bit more. And then I think your answer touched on the early part, which is while ideating on an ideas, right? Usability testing is a good way to give you the confidence that your design is heading on the right direction. So yes, so that's good. But ultimately, at the end, when you ship it to the world, did it move anything? Did it change anything? Did it improve anything? So I think as you get
a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Since we don't really have experience with that, right? I mean, we just like pass it off to somebody and then we're not getting any of the feedback and we're not being seen. How do we present that in a way that makes sense to a hiring manager, since I don't really have anything to measure success with other than feedback from mentors?
Yeah, I got this question a lot too from my class, and Rena and Willie feel free to chime in. So I think I think Willie's point earlier, just be honest and say, yeah, like it was a project with real clients, but at the end, we handed off and we didn't know the result, or they're still working on it. We don't know the result yet. But then go a step further and said that, but if you were to implement some sort of like result measurement, how would you do it? You just from design best practices and industry standards, and also from you understanding the problem space, right? Let's just say from stakeholder interview from day one, they told you that the conversion rate was really low for the website. So maybe your answer should be, okay, I want to see the the conversion goes up by 10%, right? So it's a hypothetical answer, but at least it shows your way of thinking. So I think that's how I would approach it.
Any comments from Wilbert, Rena on that?
Yeah, really. I guess I'll jump in here, and I'm sorry, Rena, I may have jumped in front of you, but really, it's the way that you think and the way that you go about offering solutions. If that's the deliverable, then make sure to focus on that, right? It's not necessarily on how the solution is implemented, because that comes after. But your job here is to offer what opportunities you found and what are some possible solutions that you're finding. And that's your deliverable there. So focus on those.
Okay.
Anything you want to share, Rena? No? Okay. So I just want to share that, Chloe, thank you for being brave, for going through that, because I would say that every single person has been in a situation where the initial thought and process is, and every start to your question was on point. And I want you to hear that from me. And then quite evidently, obviously, nerves come into the picture, and it makes it difficult to get to your conclusion of the statement that you're trying to make. We've all been there. And I think this is a particularly challenging environment because we have a lot of people here. But it will happen in interviews as well. And I think everyone needs to understand that one of the only ways to mitigate against those situations is just practicing and going through the discomfort over and over again. As you do more interviews and as you get more opportunities to speak to different types of personalities, answer tricky questions that might not be immediately obvious to you, that muscle will form, and you'll start to be able to navigate that landscape a little bit more. So I would encourage you to just continue to practice, with your friends and family, do interviews, apply for jobs, and be okay that some interviews will go better than others. And also, how we wake up on a certain day is going to be different to another day. So there's so many factors that go into it. But I just want to really congratulate you for moving through that discomfort. Rena, would you like to say something?
Yeah, sorry. I just thought I had nothing to say, and then obviously I always have something anyways. But I just wanted to reiterate what Chris said, and then remember that I thought actually you handled it really well by just saying, look, I'm really nervous right now. I think, verbalizing that, don't be afraid of that, especially, when you're going for junior level roles or entry level roles. As hiring managers, we expect that, experience with number of interviews are lower. And so if something's kind of taking slower or you're feeling like something else is going on, just verbalize it. Like if you're getting distracted by something in the room, verbalize it. It's hard for us sometimes to see what's going on around you. And don't be worried about it. We've all been there. I have stood on stages and done presentations in front of hundreds of people and had to say, I need 5 seconds to just gather my thoughts, because I just lost my train there, and it's okay, right? It happens to all of us. And like Chris says, good and bad days, you never know. So I thought you did excellent, and I thought the right thing to do in that moment was to just verbalize, look, I'm having 5 seconds of nervousness. I just need to gather myself. It was the right way to deal with it.
Thanks, Rena.
Right, and now, and if I could add to that, I'm by nature an introvert, and due to my job, I've had to become more of an extrovert because of, as Rena just said, presenting in front of hundreds of people. And there are techniques that I've been able to find that actually help me. For example, and this is just presenting in front of large people in person, rather than scanning a room and looking at everybody in the room, just focusing on one person and speaking to that one person eye to eye and moving across the room made me feel 100 times better. In a situation like this, I can zoom, pin the video, so that all of a sudden Hugh's screen is what fills your screen. So it feels more like a one-on-one conversation. And all of a sudden you're not seeing that there's right now there's seven screens in my screen right now, but we know that there's 205 participants, right? That just leaves the room, and all of a sudden it's a conversation between you and Hugh. And that's something that there's tricks, or there's things that you could test with that will help you in terms of overcoming that initial nervousness that we all get when we're interviewing, when we're being questioned. So it's definitely something that would practice. It's going to get better.
Thanks, Wood.
Thank you, Chris.
No worries. All right, well, we're going to move on to the next segment now. We're going to move into behavioral questions, and Laura will be fielding these questions from Rena. So Rena, over to you. Take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Laura, for doing this and for doing it in front of so many people as well. I appreciate it.
Thank you too so much.
No worries. I will ask you 3 questions today, and we have about 15 minutes to kind of go through them all. So that's what we'll be doing. I'm really looking for your reactions, behaviors, how you tackle things, and how you think about things. So as much as possible as you can verbalize, what was the situation you were in, what did you do, and what was the outcome. That's great. But we'll just jump into it unless you have any questions beforehand.
Okay. No, I'm just going to let you know I'm nervous too. And there's a rainstorm going on. So if I'm looking outside, it's because I hear thunder or something. But no, I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so grateful you guys are doing this with us.
Awesome. That sounds ominous as well. So yeah, that's, I hope the internet connection stays on. All right. I'd love to hear if you could describe a time in your professional career or in your student projects where you had to receive critical feedback and how you handled it and what you thought you could learn from that experience.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I gotta gather my thoughts here and think about a time. I think I recall during one of our projects, I think it was during the So to Speak project that I had not done the right kind of user testing. And I recall a few of my classmates bringing that up and saying, don't you want to test for what people are looking to touch on the screen rather than just their opinions about, like I did a survey instead of screen tests. And so it was actually really helpful for them to tell me that and for me to say, oh, you're absolutely right. I need to do that instead of just a survey where they are answering questions about hypothetically using this app, but having them, by testing, where would you tap for this feature. So yeah, actually it's great when people can give me critical feedback because then it shows something that my blind spots, I want to make sure that I'm humble enough to receive feedback and then use it to move forward and improve myself and my work.
Awesome. Do you have a specific way you prefer to receive feedback?
Well, I think the sandwich is how I like to give feedback. First something that you did great, the next something that needs improvement or that you missed, and then, but you're also doing this great. So that's how I have given feedback in the past in my career as a teacher previously, as well as in these projects.
Awesome. And is there a specific way that you really don't like received feedback that doesn't work for you at all?
I know there are different personalities and some people are more direct in the way they come off and other people are more sheepish. I think that somebody who is very strong, people who are a little bit more sensitive, sometimes I have a tendency to be maybe a little bit sensitive if you're very strong, a personality this was absolutely wrong, here's why, and there's no, but maybe you did this great too with it. No, I think that could be hard to receive, especially being new at this field. But I do keep in mind different personalities, and sometimes the way we communicate isn't necessarily, don't take it the wrong way, basically, if it's coming across harsh. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. If I spoke to a colleague of yours today, what would they say are your greatest strengths?
That's also a great question. So I'm really grateful to work with some women that I'm really fond of and who I have come to develop great working relationships with. And I think they would say that some of my greatest strengths lie in my ability to work well with others on a team and to consider the needs of other people and to communicate my own needs well. So keeping in mind the things that they have a goal of, and then also the things that I need to get done too, and then compromising to make things happen. I think that's a great strength that I have, as well as planning, taking the time to plan something well, and then executing that. And again, I think communicating, this is what needs to happen to the right people.
Could you give me an example of a project where some of these strengths have kind of come to fruition and how they were used to get the projects to a successful conclusion?
Okay, got to think about that one. With UX or with? a previous.
It could be UX, but I think it could also be something else. But it would be great if you could think maybe
Okay.
the one of the projects you've had through the harness
Yeah.
project,
And-
like how you
Okay.
used some of those skills to get there.
Okay, so for example, we've brought this up with the Veggie Saver project already, but finding retailers or wholesalers was a really big challenge. Also, just in general, sourcing the interview participants without a whole lot of time and without any compensation, having to tap into our networks. That was a really big challenge. It was probably one of the bigger challenges, I would say, with these 3 projects. And in order to find retailers, a lot of people on our teams did collaborate with, you know, some of us accessed retailers. Chloe, I think, was one of them actually. And we shared some of those resources. So I collaborated with our team by, what was that? What did we do? We got together occasionally and said, hey, let's put our heads together and work through some of the ideas. How should we prioritize making these happen? And so I'm having trouble tying together the specific skills that I mentioned and then that project. But yeah, there's definitely ways in which I know that we put our heads together and worked on trying to source the information for that wholesaler perspective, which it was challenging.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I'd love to hear a little bit about your areas for development as well. What do you think are areas that you need to work on yourself?
Yeah. So I'm aware that this is a totally new swing for me. I'm coming from teaching and I'm going into technology. So the technical skills are probably one of the hardest things for me, and specifically working on prototyping and making that fully functional and be really responsive is something that I'm working on and trying to learn and trying to do Figma courses on. And that's something that I have a lot of room to grow in and to learn about.
Awesome.
I would also say design systems is something that I find interesting, but need more experience in learning about as well, and hand off to developers. Yeah. They keep coming to me.
Is there any areas within collaboration and teamwork that you think that you have areas for development in?
That's a great question. You know, working in different time zones was a little challenging. Trying to make sure that I'm considering the time other people are in when setting up meetings. And I think just time management, that's been a challenge for me as a mother, as a student, as, you know, a teacher, just trying to manage the moving parts of my life to manage the time to do the work that I need to do, and to make sure that it is happening and I'm achieving the goals on time. So that's something that I can grow on.
Yeah, as a joint mom parent, I hear you. I applaud you for doing both the full-time job and a course and all the other
Oh my
stuff.
gosh, thank you so much.
I'd love to hear about a time where you've worked on a project and realized that your first proposed direction maybe wasn't working, and then what you did to change direction and what happened.
Oh, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, could you tell me about a time where you've worked on a project and you realized that the first proposed direction you were taking wasn't working out the way you thought it would, and kind of how you realized it wasn't working and how you set a new direction for the project?
Okay, let's see. I'm going back in my mind to BizMiner, which was a platform that it was our first project with our cohort that was for a report, business valuation report platform. Even that's just a mouthful, but to explain what this software does, you can already see that it's a little thorny from the beginning. I remember trying to figure out on their application, on their website, how to make it appear more usable. But they had a lot of issues with users just getting lost. They had a lot of stuff on their application. So I remember feeling like the answer was to like basically wipe everything off and then just put 3 columns. And I recall that wasn't going to work very well because that wasn't showing kind of everything that needed to be shown. And then having like this hamburger menu needed to come down from the top. And I just recall that I needed to do a lot more sketching to come up with ideas to solve the complexity of that application. So it took me longer, and that was our first project, but it took me longer to come up with ideas for how to solve that. It was so just like I couldn't relate to what it was doing. It was just a different industry that I needed to learn a lot about, which we did through a lot of the interviews, but I had to switch gears late in the game with sketching on those ideas. And it was challenging. Yeah.
And so what precisely made you, I think you kind of said it, but I just want to make sure I understood. What precisely made you realize that you had to switch gears? What was it that made you realize that the solution wasn't working?
I'm having trouble remembering because it was actually quite a while ago. So maybe that's not the best example, and I could probably think of one that was more recent, but just, I think it was that it didn't have all of the options that needed to be available. And that I needed to have more options available for the different types of reports. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And how did you go about coming up with a new direction?
Yeah, I did a lot of sketching with pencil and paper just so I could throw away easily the ideas that just didn't cut it. And then I don't recall doing usability testing with that project at that point. I think I actually asked my husband to look at some of the sketches and be like, where would you go to find this report? You know? Yeah, just pen and paper.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I will end it here because I also know we're a bit over time.
Yeah.
So
okay, thank you so much, Reno. It's great to chat with you.
Thanks so much, both of you. Appreciate that section. Any feedback from the panel that you want to share with Laura on how she responded?
I guess I could go here. So this was a really good very typical way that an interview is going to function, where there's a good back and forth between both the interviewee and the interviewer, and in some of those questions are, there's pauses, there's alternate questions that happen. So that it was really good to see that how you handled it. It was that was cool. The last point that you made is really interesting to me, because you said that you just showed it to your husband. You did something, you showed it to your husband, and just to get some feedback. A lot of times we get so deep into the work that we're doing that we tend to make our own decisions. So it's always great to see or to get someone else's help. I guess a question that I have for you is that in UX is a space that I'm very passionate about, because it's one of the few spaces that I could think about where you bring your whole self. You bring everything that you know based on your previous experience into how you about making your or coming up with your solutions. You stated that you have a teaching background, right? And now you're going into UX. And it's to me very interesting to figure out or to find out how people think one translates into the other. So one of the questions that I always ask is, what were you doing before? And how are you going to bring your knowledge there into the space of UX? So I ask you that now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've done a lot of thinking about that. And I think my greatest skill as a teacher is that I'm an observer. I've been trained to be an observer as well as empathize. I know that I have the ability to put myself in students' shoes and that I know how to think like they're thinking and try to put myself in their brain to see what do they need right now that can serve them better. So I think those are my superpowers that I bring to UX. And I also appreciate that UX is a career that you bring your whole self to. It's why I was drawn to it as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Hugh, do you want to?
Well, I love that, Wilbur. I think the few things that you call out there. Just quick observation from me. I felt like you were being very genuine and you opened up yourself, and there's a back and forth conversation. So I'm getting to know you as a potential teammate, right? And again, going back to my point earlier, all the interview is doing is trying to understand like how can this person be a team player in this new team and company. And so I think you've done a good job there.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I want to also reiterate that point. It felt like the way the conversation flowed and the way you responded, Laura, was almost like you and Rena could be a part of a team. There wasn't this unbalanced dynamic that sometimes can happen in interviews where someone is sort of just answering the question but not really connecting with the interviewer. So I felt like you were able to bring in that authenticity to connect, and that's a big part of interviewing, is try and find how do we connect with this person that we're just meeting, and trying to meet them on their level as well. Cool.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that.
That's the end of the segments of this webinar. There's a whole bunch of Q&A questions. I am conscious of time. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to go through them quickly and just ask a few of them to the panel with the time that we have remaining. Panelists, if you want to answer any over text while we're doing this, just to try to get back to as many people as possible, that would be appreciated. But let me start from the top. So one of the anonymous attendees asks, how do hiring managers decide whether or not an interviewee's skills is more important than years of experience? So I take it from that question, we're assuming that there's a difference there between the skills that they're demonstrating in their work versus the experience that they have on their resume. Any thoughts?
I guess I could take that in. What I would suggest is really be frank about the skill set that you have. You may come with experience from the visual designer point of view. You may come from the experience of a researcher or an architect, an information architect, right? There are different levels or different spaces that each of us have expertises in. Be frank to yourself about what is the area that you're an expert in, and the other ones are an opportunity for you to learn in, an opportunity for you to grow in. That's what forms what's called a T-shaped designer, where you are an expert in one area. For example, Laura, you mentioned that you struggle with design systems. Why? Because your brain isn't working in that sense right now. You're not trained as a visual designer, as a brand person. And that's completely fine if you're upfront with it and you say, you know what, my expertise is more in the empathy of the customer, but I need to learn more on these other things. So being frank is probably one of the most important things here.
Great, thanks, Wilbert. Next question we have from Stephen. Would it be, and I think we've covered this, but just quickly, would it be recommended to create a slide deck separate from actual portfolios that you can almost introduce everything in a presentation format, or is it better to show what is actually on your website, even though it might be longer in size? So maybe just a few opinions on this from the panel.
I can start off. Generally, I recommend having both. So your portfolio is there to kind of showcase you to the world, right? It's where the recruiter is going to go who works for the company and look and make sure it's working. It's also where we as hiring manager, when we review CVs, visit the portfolio to see the fidelity of the work and the quality of the work, right? So your portfolio is always important. But when you are in a portfolio review session, when you're doing a presentation to a company, and you have that hour that Hugh talked about, or half an hour, whatever time you're getting, I would make that into a presentation style. So personally, I have a very outdated portfolio. Please don't go look at it. But like, you know, it was made back in 2017 where like, you know, the cases that were there were relevant. And then I have a presentation deck that I keep more up to date, that has, you know, more of a presentation style and I can showcase to companies. And so you need both is my short answer. They just solve for different things.
Thanks, Rita. Okay, moving on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go for it. It's okay.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that's the big difference between an online portfolio and a digital portfolio. Online portfolio is what you're going to have on HTTP in front of. That's your website. Your digital portfolio is what you're going to present. And the important thing here in that presentation is how you tell your story. If it's one piece that you're showing, and that is telling the story of how you think, how you go about your process, then that's enough. If it's 2 pieces, if it's 3 pieces, it doesn't matter the amount of pieces. The important thing here is, are you getting your points across? Are you getting your storytelling across? That's more important than the amount of pieces that you show. But for the person that doesn't know you, the website is going to be very important for you to have.
Great, thank you. Hugh, are you all good, or any other comments?
Oh, good. Yeah, I think we can move on to the next one.
No worries. So from Tom, and this is a good question. I thought the project and insights were really great, but what would make this an outstanding project? And he gives the example, why would Alana as a candidate be chosen or discarded based on the project? So what's the sort of red flag or green flags? What are we looking for here from as hiring managers?
I can start. So, I mean, definitely that's I would not use Alana as a project here, but generally speaking, I think, red flag is when the designer skips steps, right? Jumping straight to solutions, don't do any research or do research for the sake of research, right? Like the basic stuff. And you can tell, like as hiring managers, we can tell. I think what would make some things outstanding is basically combining a lot of the talking points that we had for the past hour, which is, did the designer do the due diligence of understanding the problem space? Did they, when they go to it, and once they do understand the problem, did they spend time and go broad, really explore different, ideas, or they just pick one and just go with it, right? And then once they finish with that, like, what is their rigors of validating the right concept, right? Do they do user testing? All of that. So I think, all of these moving pieces combined would make a candidate stronger. And also storytelling, like how does that designer present that work? Do they care enough about it? Like, are they really 100% in it? So I think that's just different factors that go through the whole interviewing process that makes a candidate a little bit more outstanding than the others.
Right. Any other comments? Okay. Ruth asks, what are the advantages of going deeply into one project like the Veggie Saver project versus showing a breadth of several UX projects that the interviewee has worked on?
Yeah, I guess I could take that. So it's definitely a very similar answer to what I was saying before. If that one project shows how you go about your entire thinking, so if you look at it from a very high level, you start with a problem statement, and that problem statement either comes from a business need or a customer pain point that's been identified. And then there's a process that happens throughout coming up between that and a solution. There's a textbook process that could be utilized, but what we're really looking for is how you add your own personality to that solution making, right? So it's a mixture of both. How do you insert your personality and yourself into how you come up with those solutions, and how do you solve that problem statement? Those two are pivotal in terms of how that process of selection happens. Whether you're going to show that I'm able to demonstrate I could solve via this one project, or I could solve it via 2, 3, 4, 5 different projects. So it's more up to it's a question to ask yourself, am I answering that question with one project, or do I need several projects to do so?
Thanks, Wilbert. Rena, I might put this question to you. Davina asks, how do interview questions and expectations differ for an experienced designer versus a beginner?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, especially when we're looking for what we call ICs, so individual contributors versus managers. If we're looking later on, we're really looking for people to be able to take more initiative and impetus in projects and take ownership over them, right? And so early on in a career, we expect people to be able to take an action, take a task, take a project, go do it. As you move up the level from junior designer to staff principal level, we expect you to own projects, initiate projects, move them through to completion. And so it's really kind of the work that the people are doing that we're looking for and is different. Some of the questions are similar, right? But they will just be looking for different things. So from a principal designer or researcher, I will want to hear, like, how have you initiated projects? How have you found projects, started projects? How have you seen them end to end? How do you bring junior team members into your project? How do you mentor other people around you? Things like that become more important. When you're earlier in your career, I'm looking more for how do you execute on things that you're given? What's the quality of work that you're doing? How do you handle problems, right? When you don't understand something, how do you move through not understanding it to understanding it? How do you problem solve those things? Because there will be things you don't understand, right? The rest of us have 20 plus years individually, right? And I still meet things I don't understand all the time. So the aspect of problem solving and figuring that out is something that I definitely care a lot about earlier on. I hope that kind of answered it at least. It'd be interesting to hear from the other panelists on this as well.
Any other thoughts? No? Okay. All good. All right. So the next one I'll jump to is what helps set someone apart from all of the other candidates applying for UX roles in a competitive market.
I'll give a quick one, because I know that recently I've been, for the past, few years I've been interviewing, and I would say the ones that, because usually after an interview, a few of us who've been involved in the process, we'll get together and we'll share our thoughts on the candidate. Usually the one that stood out was the one that, of course, didn't have a lot of yellow flags, none of that, but also a lot of the things that I talked about in my last comment. But I think also the things that resonate with many people who agree on a stronger candidate is around, why is that person interested in this role and this company and this project, right? Like you can feel the passion there, and the problem space that they want to help with, and also their career growth. At this point in their career, why this role is a really good way for them to do, let's just say, user research, or which part of that, the skill that they want to develop. So if they have a strong story and they feel like, this is something that they can really thrive, then that is what makes them a little bit more strong than the others.
Great, thanks, Hugh. a couple more questions and then we'll end it. So let's have a look here. A lot of portfolio questions. I think there's a lot of repetition here just around what makes a portfolio stand out. Hopefully, if you sort of watch back the session with Alana, some of the comments made, this will give you some more insight into that area. Okay, so, okay, maybe we'll end with this one. Where is it? I saw it just before. Okay, final comment. This is from an anonymous attendee, and they say, are the graduates aware of how awesome they are? I also have stage fright, but I think the graduates are doing really well at giving great responses and thoughtful commentary. The mentors are really great too at talking and communicating well. So appreciate that comment from the attendees. And I think I want to echo that. You know, thanks so much for all of your time and being a part of this demonstration. There's a lot of interesting comments and insights from the panel. I think we can all take away into our own job search. There's a lot of questions here that we didn't get to. More than happy to field these over email. If you want to email info@Harness Projects, we'll take the time to respond to you and give you as much feedback as we can. And just a few things to close with. If you are looking to learn UX, if you're looking to build real-world projects in your portfolio, we have a couple of intakes coming up. So the next 6-7 weeks, we have courses running in the US. We also have courses running in Australia. Simply reach out at our website if you want to get in touch and speak about whether it fits in for what your career goals are. We'd love to support you. So with that said, I think we'll wrap up today and let you all, I know Rena's got class in about a minute, so no rest for the wicked here. And yeah, thanks again for everyone's time, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Much.